Hey everybody, I am Aaron Williams. Thank you so much for joining this conversation with us. What we're going to be talking about today is something related to women's health. So, just a little bit of a background on me. I am a product manager and I'm a product builder, and I'm currently doing some research on a concept that I think is has some appeal, but I would like to validate some of my assumptions. So part of my process is interviewing experts, and I'd love to, in this conversation, get some insights from our guest on um, really validating my hypothesis. My hypothesis for something that I'm working on right now is that all of our relationships can be made better if women have a circle of care around them from menarche to menopause and beyond. That's it. So with that, I am going to bring in my guest today. My guest today is Christina Gentry. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and so much more. So without further ado, I'm just going to kick it to her and say thank you so much, Christina, for joining me. I'm so glad to have this conversation with you.
Well, my pleasure, and it's good to be here with you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. So, as you mentioned, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have over 17 years of experience, and I recently went in to get my doctorate in integrative and functional nutrition. I'm working on finalizing my dissertation now. It's very exciting. And I have a private practice in which I see people in person in Sandy Springs, Georgia, and telehealth in California, Hawaii, and Georgia.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so my first question here is, so most therapists sort of pick a lane, right? You do couples therapy, you see women individually, and like you said, you're studying functional nutrition at the doctoral level. So how did all of that become one practice?
Sure. So over the years, I became more drawn to working with couples exclusively in the marital relationship for married women for two reasons. The marital relationship is really unique with some beautiful experiences as well as some significant challenges. And the work that I do with married women is kind of the solo marital support that they need when their husbands, for whatever reason, are not available to participate in that therapeutic journey. The nutrition
Oh, yeah, this is great. Yeah, sorry.
the nutrition piece came in with my interest in health and the whole person. And so I integrate that as I would any intervention when I work with my clients, really tips and strategies that will help even out their mood and bring balance to themselves and ultimately their relationships.
Awesome. So did you have something in particular that kind of kept showing up in the therapy room that sent you back to back to school for nutrition?
Hmm. I'd say one thing I noticed is that when I would work with individuals who had, let's say, anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, and they wouldn't be eating meals or going long periods with not eating, or they're eating a lot of candy or highly processed foods. And I thought that these things were related to their dysregulation. And I was working with them with certain psychological strategies. It didn't quite make sense to only address that and not also address some of the very fundamental underlying issues with their diet or eating habits that may be playing a part in their dysregulation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when you say care for the whole person, like,
Mhm.
what does that look like with a real client on a normal week? Like ideally, what would that
Hmm. Sure. So that means checking in on certain levels with their nutrition, hydration, of course, dealing with the specific marital issues or relationship challenges that they're having, along with the other kinds of techniques that I work with clients about as far as like boundaries, differentiation, so on.
That's amazing. Yeah, this is it feels like a very unique type of practice. I haven't really seen this before, but it makes total sense that you have to look at the whole person, not just the what's happening with them psychologically, but how so many other factors related to their health can be affecting their psyche. So, very unique background. I love that about you. That's awesome. So, I'm going to get into a little bit different line of questioning here around our mood and how that's affected by what we eat. So this question is a little different. So what do you think about when a woman's mood shifts across a month? Like, just in general, what's happening for her emotionally?
Sure. So usually when a woman is during her ovulation phase, she's at her peak. So her mood typically will correlate with being at her peak. She's probably easier to get along with. She may be more flirtatious, things like that, more agreeable, maybe even feel a little bit higher in her self-esteem. And then, the week before the menstrual cycle and, during the menstrual cycle, that may be more difficult with her mood. So in general, with a woman, that is kind of the general flow of what she may experience mood wise.
Okay. And then back to one of the things that you're an expert here on, the food aspect. So
Hmm.
obviously, you remember those Snickers commercials where you're basically in a better mood if you have something to eat against
Hmm.
Snickers. They said it much more creatively than I did, but they're like inextricably tied together, food and mood. So what happens? Is there something that a woman can do nutrition wise to change how she feels during a hard week in that respect?
Of course. So some of the things that women can do are, well, first of all, eat a whole foods diet. I know it's kind of maybe a trend for people to say that, but it is very, very true. Our natural food has a lot of vitamins and minerals, the things that our body uses for fuel, for healing, etc. And so, women really benefit from omega-3 fatty acids. Those are known for reducing inflammation, which when a woman is around her menstrual cycle, there is increased inflammation. Inflammation is also essentially like thought of as the root of disease, as it relates to even depression, anxiety, etc. So other things that she can eat to help stabilize her mood, grass-fed red meat. So red meat has heme iron, which is a form of iron that the body readily absorbs. And then women need this because it also has iron, as I mentioned, B12 and zinc, which are really important for women's health. And then also vitamin D, that's very important. I can get that from the sun, but if you're not getting enough, supplementation is great. Um, and staying hydrated. Hydration is really important also for mental health, for clarity. And then that can also help with reducing some, uh, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm having multiple thoughts and ways to go with this,
No, go through it. So many different ways to go. Yeah.
but yeah, so hydration is really important. And then magnesium. Magnesium is really important for women. So, uh, I think those would be the main that, and I think adding calcium would be some of the main nutrients that women would need.
What do you think about that glass of evening wine, or those couple glasses of evening wine that a lot of women like to have? Uh,
Mhm.
does that help or hinder anything that she might be going through emotionally um, during any of these parts of the cycle?
Sure. Well, what I can say is that alcohol, even red wine, can lead to inflammation, even though it has some relaxation effects. So wine wouldn't be my first choice. If someone is looking to relax, I would say going for magnesium. That's great for helping with anxiety, muscle tension, sleep, uh, cramping, that kind of thing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. In what everyday things like sleep, stress, skip meals, too much caffeine, um,
Mhm.
quietly turn up the volume on a low mood? What makes things
So
worse here?
what makes things worse? So stress in little bursts is helpful and adaptive, but when we experience chronic stress, it does deplete our immune system. And chronic stress also highly depletes magnesium. So one of the things with, kind of throughout the day with mood is our glucose levels. We can stabilize those with the types of food that we eat, even in the order that we eat those foods at regular intervals throughout the day. For everyone, but definitely for women, eating within the first hour of rising. and then eating a savory meal for breakfast, and starting with a fibrous food. So this is known as food sequencing. So the fibrous food first, then the protein and fat, and then the healthy carbohydrate. Eating in that order can be helpful and stabilizing glucose levels over a period of like 4 to 5 hours. Versus if we eat something that's a highly carbohydrate heavy meal, or we're starting off with carbohydrates first, then we may last an hour and a half. We'll get a spike and then we'll drop.
It's fascinating because that is actually what a lot of people tend to go to in the morning, especially if they're doing that morning cup of coffee. Tend to get the croissant, whatever it is. That's the carbs that we all love. So good tips there. So many women have learned to kind of push through and not say anything, right, during the various cycle. What does that carrying that silently cost them, and and affect the people around them?
Sure. Well, for the woman who feels like she can't say, there could be various reasons for that. For example, if someone has a trauma background, and there was some sexual violence, then a period can be adaptive, and so they may not want someone else to know when they have their period. Um, it could be sort of a woman thing if they think, oh, well, men don't really need to know that, or why do my children need to know when I'm on my cycle? So it could be a matter of privacy. So it really just depends. It varies from woman to woman.
Do you think there's an impact there, like a cost, and not wanting to open up around these things?
Mm. If there was a cost, I would say it depends on how much her symptoms are impacting her and how she functions in her relationships. Um, if she um, if she is too quiet and her symptoms are pervasive, it would probably be very helpful for those around her to understand what she's going through, and then seeing how they could be supportive to her during that time to help with some of what she's experiencing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so you sit with couples every week.
Mhm.
How often is a woman's mood or stress shaping the room without either person naming it?
Hmm. That's actually, I would say, pretty rare. Um, generally, when I'm working with couples, it's pretty even, in a sense of what each individual is bringing. Each individual usually has some component of the relationship that's not really working well, and then you have the clash of that from person to person.
That makes sense. So walk us through a pattern you may see a lot. What does the argument look like on the surface, and what's happening underneath that?
Mhm.
In your
Sure,
practice?
sure. So with couples, let's see. Let's take. Um, there's so many different ones. Let's look at finances. So on the surface,
Finances?
oh yes. Oh, the
Okay,
sound is doing a little something. Um, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good. Yeah, finances. It sounds like okay.
Oh, okay, okay. So finances, how those are handled. Couples will talk about the issue. It becomes an issue if there's a perpetual issue that it keeps coming up and it gets gridlocked, they get stuck, they don't know how to navigate it. Usually, what's underneath those kinds of dynamics are deeply held beliefs or values concerning what that means. So, for example, if someone grew up in a very poor environment where they swore that they would never be in that situation again, and they are overly concerned about their financial situation, maybe they come across as controlling, but they're trying to protect themselves and their family. Whereas someone else didn't grow up in that kind of environment, and so they feel very free with money. You can always get a job, kind of free spirited with it. So it really comes down to how each individual views, in this case, money, what it means to them, and how deeply rooted the positive or negative association with it is.
That's great. That's great. Without other examples, what are some other areas where conflict might show up, just in general? Money, finances.
Oh, sure. So communication, conflict about how things are being communicated, it's pretty common. I would say sex, frequency of sex, quality time, parenting. I think those are probably the major ones, common
Those are
ones.
some pretty major issues. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so if you can you tell us about a couple? Of course, no names. Scrub the names.
Mhm.
Where something sort of clicked and the dynamic changed in the relationship. Just like a
Mhm.
positive, a happy path, positive outcome here to sort of like the practice that you do.
Sure. So I'll kind of do a constellation, so this will not be too identifiable.
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
Couples who essentially, a lot of couples start out thinking that their relationship can't make it. And a lot of these couples have some aha moments in learning how they're communicating and learning their portion and how they're communicating. I find it to be really effective when they're able to understand their personal responsibility for their choices in the relationship, no matter what their partner is doing. So that's along the lines of differentiation and personal responsibility and boundaries. So that usually helps get underneath the surface a bit because every couple is going to have a moment where their partner is non participatory, or maybe their partner is having a bad day or in a bad mood. That's not an excuse for the other person to lash out or yell or be critical, etc. But it's very easy to do because those interactions have been a pattern. And so this kind of brings me back also to my faith. I'm a Christian. And so Jesus talked a lot about how we're to treat our neighbors and our enemies in different ways. And so we love our neighbors, we love our enemies. So taking that principally with couples, I let them know that, when your spouse is acting like a neighbor and when your spouse is acting like an enemy, the principles are the same. There's a level of love, of courtesy, of respect, of personal responsibility that we are to give to our partners. So in these couples in which they are able to gravitate to those kinds of things and it starts clicking, they communicate with a little bit more patience. They're using the skills. They're understanding that they're not the only ones at fault, which is, I think, really alleviating for a lot of couples in which there tends to be blame, either or one direction. And each of them are seeing, oh, my partner also is responsible, and oh, my partner is actually making some steps, and oh, wow, oh, I see what I'm doing, and I see how I'm impacting this positive change. So a lot of these couples reach points of reduced conflicts, being able to talk through conversations of conflict more easily, and even for those who are Christian, restoring their faith.
It sounds like one partner has an aha moment, and then maybe another partner will sort of also do the same. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's at the same time, sometimes it's at different moments.
Oh, that must be really exciting to see in practice to
It
impact
is.
lives that way. So I know you're trained in the Gottman Method. We've talked about
Yes.
the Gottman Method a little bit a long time ago in the past, but for our audience, is there a maybe if you could explain to us a little bit about what the Gottman Method is, and is there a
Mhm.
Gottman idea, sort of like bids for connection, repair
Mm.
attempts, that lands especially well in these moments that you just described.
Sure. So the Gottman method is a research-based method based on Dr. John and Julie Gottman's work and their colleagues over the past 40 years. So they looked at what not only what doesn't work in a relationship, but more importantly, what does work in a relationship. And I think that's part of the reason why their strategy is so effective. The interventions are skills-based and structured with room for, clinical nuance. And it's dyadic work, which I think is really fantastic. So there are lots of opportunities in the sessions where, me as a therapist, I'm observing and watching the two of them discuss something, or I'm helping them have a more constructive dialogue with some of the interventions and skills that the Gottman method comes with. So notably, when it comes to conflict, there are the four horsemen, which are pretty popular. That's criticism, contempt, offensiveness, and stonewalling. There's one that's very close to that. It's not a four horsemen, but it's flooding, which is an important factor in stonewalling and other unhealthy conflict behaviors.
Can I interrupt you?
Um,
What is flooding?
yes.
What is flood? I've heard of the
Oh,
other the actual four horsemen, but the flooding is new. What's that?
oh yes. So flooding is a physiological response. It's our fight, flight, or freeze response when our heart rate is at 100 beats per minute or above. And when we're in this state, we are not able to properly take in incoming information. We lose contact with humor. We misread what our partner is saying. So essentially, what's happening is that our amygdala are more active at that moment, and our prefrontal cortex takes a back seat. And our prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that is involved in logical reason and decision making, and our amygdala more so in emotion regulation and responding to the fight, flight, or freeze response. This is very common for couples. There's research that shows that women, in some regard, tend to be more flooded than men. It doesn't mean that men don't get flooded. It just means that women are often flooded. There could be various reasons for that. So all of these things get paid attention to in couples. And couples work with the Gottman Method. The Gottman Method is focused on bridging the friendship, bridging the conflict, and bridging the shared meaning system of a relationship.
That's really incredible. Thanks for breaking that down for us. So when one partner is having a low or depleted stretch, how do healthy couples stay connected instead of
Mm.
being apart?
Mm. Yeah, I really like that question. Healthy couples are able to talk about what's happening and not feel threatened. They're also able to provide a safe space for that to happen. So what that means is um, things aren't taken personally, and there's a shared space of, hey, I see that you are not well. How can I be supportive to you? How can we get through this together? Um, Healthy couples are empathic. There's mutual understanding that's offered. It's essentially the absence of criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. Flooding won't happen because there's no perceived threat in that moment.
What about those healthy couples that one of the people, or maybe both, they're afraid to put their guard down because they are afraid of being taken advantage of in these moments? Do you have anything that you would say to someone?
Sure. Of course, those specific things that are related to that would best be addressed, whether in individual therapy and or their own daily practice. Um, if those things concern their partner, then that is something that they should get help with, depending on what that is. Um, I would say that there is a time to learn how to talk about that fearful interaction with your partner, but your partner does have to be a safe enough person to do that. If it is reasonable, let's say the situation is someone's afraid and their partner is genuinely a healthy individual who's open and warm and secure, then we know that it's primarily resting within the individual who's fearful, and we can look at it that way. But if there are legitimate reasons within that partner that create lack of safety, let's say that there's hostile sarcasm, which is contempt. Let's say that there's criticism, defensive dismissiveness, denial, gaslighting. All of those things are very unhealthy and do not provide a safe environment. So at that point, the couple interaction or the individual therapy aspect of that would have to be looked at first before he or she can even open up about those vulnerable parts.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. So most conversations about this kind of stop at the partner. But a woman doesn't live inside a couple. She lives inside a whole circle of people. That's part of my hypothesis. And so, beyond a partner, who else in a woman's life shapes how she's supported and how she feels? Is this maybe friends, sisters, moms, or kids? Like, how do those people affect a woman? And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A woman's social support. Women are social, of course, human beings in general are social, but women definitely are social, especially in terms of support. Very, very much typically wanting to lend support and also open to receive support. So their support system is are their friends, their family members, sometimes extended family, sometimes it can be church family, but people who the woman identifies with as a part of her support system.
Okay. And then sort of what changes for a woman when the people close to her actually get it versus her having to constantly explain how she feels every
Mm,
time of the month, every stage.
mhm. Sure. I think she feels seen and heard and safe. Um, I think it does a lot for a woman to not, for her not to feel like she has to over-explain herself. That's one of the markers, if you will, of feeling or being misunderstood, or when a relationship doesn't have mutual understanding, is a constant feeling of not being heard or understood. And so that comes with having to repeat oneself, or one feels like they have to defend themselves or, well, convince them. But if that's absent, if it's truly a supportive environment and, they understand, they know, they go with it, then it's like, okay, great.
Yeah, that sounds really healthy. Yeah, I like that. So, what does it look like when a friend shows up well? Do you have any like example of just in general, like what? Like, that sounds like a very simple question, right? Like, what's a great friend do for you? But like, how does that help you psychologically?
Yeah, so I think a great friend allows for safety. There are certain things that maybe a woman can't share with her parents, and maybe for some reason she can't share with her partner or her spouse. So a friend offers empathy. A friend offers understanding. A friend offers fun and enjoyment. That's an important part of our social nature as well. We need to experience pleasant things, and our friendships are great sources of that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And maybe even a friend helps alleviate certain burdens that you might carry.
Mhm,
They help
mhm.
with that. Okay, so let's get back to like what you're really, really, really passionate about, and that's food is care. How can a partner making the right dinner or a friend dropping off a meal be real support and not just a nice gesture?
Yeah, so those things sound great. I think it's not peer pressuring your friend. This happens a lot with alcohol use in general, but even when it comes to something sweet, there are plenty of sweet things that are healthier for us than things that are poor for us. So if you know that your friend is really craving a piece of cake, but it is highly processed, filled with a bunch of sugar, it's going to make her blood sugar spike. She's trying to save lives from food, you know that. So you wouldn't offer her a slice of cake. You'd say, hey, why don't we have some fruit and yogurt instead? Okay, it's kind of funny to say it like that, but you find alternative ways to support. I know what your goal is. I'm not here to sabotage your goal. I'm also not here to make you feel as badly as I feel. It's a friend is a good friend when they want their friend to be healthy, even if they don't live a healthy lifestyle, right? You don't want a friend who's going to drag you down and, encourage unhealthy habits. You want a friend who's actually looking out for your health and saying, hey, this is what I know is good for you, and I'm rooting for you.
That makes a ton of sense because uh, I think about the husbands out there where they know where a certain time of month comes around and they're
Hmm.
going to be asked maybe to go get some chocolate. Not
Hmm.
to generalize all women because not every woman wants
Sure.
chocolate, but I think it's
Hmm.
there are women that do
Hmm.
enjoy chocolate during their time of the month. Well, maybe
Yeah.
we go for the healthier chocolate solution.
Yes. Yes. Well, dark chocolate at 70% or above is actually good for women. It's filled with magnesium. So that's part of the reason why a lot of women do crave chocolate, one of the reasons. So
That's great. Yeah, that
yeah.
makes total sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So for families with kids, what does
Mhm.
honest, age appropriate openness look like at home? Just from a like communication,
Mm.
healthy family psychology perspective.
Mhm. Sure. So I would say things that concern their well-being or what is within their, I'm sorry, I'm saying there like, who's on my mind, which there am I talking about?
Break it down.
Okay. So the parents, if they are, if what they are talking about concerns their children's education, their eating habits, their schedule, etc., things that are very important for them to know, things that are helpful for the children's development, for self-responsibility, all of those things are important to share. And there's a measure of open communication about that. Things that are not appropriate to share with parents are things that pertain to the parents' relationship. I would say pretty much everything. Um, I think it's important to have clear boundaries. So parents aren't saying things like, "Oh, well, you're not getting this because daddy's a meanie," or, "Oh, you know what? I know your mom said no TV right now, but I'm going to say you can have TV." Well, that creates splitting between children. And, that also will mean that at some point they'll know, how to use parents against each other. We'll try that anyway. But it's really important for parents to, as much as possible, be on the same page about things and not triangulate their children. And so triangulation is referring to the third piece of a relationship that's introduced to release stress. It's a difficult, parents have a difficult job. They have a lot of emotions, they have their own experiences, they can be hurt by their kids. But on that note, it could be very important for parents to talk with their children about their behavior and what happened, but being very mindful of not making their children responsible for their feelings, right? Just like children's feelings are their feelings. They need to know that, but they also need to understand how someone else's behaviors can affect them and how their behaviors can affect someone else. Same thing with relationships and couples.
Absolutely. So that makes me think, though, can a woman's children contribute to her circle of care? Maybe her
Hmm.
children, can they help mommy feel better throughout the month, or can older children, teenagers, perhaps? Is there something that they can do to be a part of this care circle?
So I think so. Yes, I think there are some things that children can do. However, my frame of mind is that it shouldn't be relied upon. I think it's important for children not to be parentified or be put in a position to care for their parents. Most children are naturally going to want to help their parents anyway. So in some regard, that's okay. But I think it's really important for parents to be very clear within themselves what they're relying on their children for and kind of discerning, okay, is this something that is really okay for them to help me with? They see something that I need and they get it and it's fine, versus I'm relying on my children to now meet this need for me. That is, I think, an emotional burden that's too much for them.
Absolutely.
Other people may disagree.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes, this is on the internet, so people will absolutely agree and disagree with everything we say. But that's
Yeah.
that's okay. So, what happens to a woman who goes through a hard season with no circle of care around her at all? Are there any like psychological things that might happen, or just things in general that would just bring a woman down, or um, make life even harder than it already is with no circle?
We need social support. So when we don't have it, we can be prone to feeling lonely, hopeless, helpless, depending on what the situations are surrounding the woman's environment in her life, could be really difficult. We absolutely need social support, especially through hardships.
Absolutely. Okay. So let me think for a second here. Some of the seasons aren't a few days. Seasons when we're talking about things that happen in women's health, and they can last years. So perimenopause is one. So are conditions like endometriosis or PCOS, or now it's called PMOS. Um, so I'll set the stage on those, and I want to get your read on what they do to people and relationships. So, question here is: When a woman is in a long, hard stretch with no clear end date, what does that do to a relationship over time?
So this is what's going on within her and how that affects the relationship.
Absolutely, and her, especially because this is a longer period of something that she's carrying through in her body, based on it could be any
Mhm.
given number of conditions.
Sure. So there's always going to be some variance from woman to woman. I would say that some of these transitions are very difficult for women. It affects their sleep, it affects their day to day. They have to relearn emotional regulation sometimes, change their diet, change how they exercise. So I think how the relationship piece again varies on what their symptoms are also, and also the relationship dynamics.
Yeah,
Um, but it's difficult. You know, being a woman is beautiful and it's also very challenging. Uh, so the strain on her can be impacted by the strain of the relationship. If her husband is very supportive, understanding, embraces her changes, that can only be helpful for her to have that support. I think it was mentioned earlier about turning toward bids of connection. I forgot to mention that earlier, but this is one way that men and women can turn toward each other, right? So a bid for connection is when your partner reaches out to you. It could be as simple as, "Hey, I'm not feeling well." That's right, communication bid for connection. A way to turn toward that response is something like, "Oh, that's a response," or "How can I help you?" That's a response, or giving a hug. That's a response of turning toward. Versus turning away is no response, and turning against is you're always not feeling well, or don't come near me, you smell, or whatever is happening. It's really about inviting and embracing. If you kind of think about that conceptually, emotionally, verbally, physically, embracing a woman during these times can help her get through it.
absolutely. So, what about the husband that's just like she's changed, like just
Mhm.
completely checked out? Like, what would you say to that kind of attitude?
Well, there's probably other underlying issues if a husband has that kind of attitude in that kind of way. uh, that kind of what I got out of that example is criticism and a little bit of contempt. so,
Sure.
so there's other things going on that have to be addressed. He doesn't sound like a supportive individual, and so to have that kind of response, my goodness, a woman has no control over this. These cycle changes are a part of her DNA. She will go through them if she lives long enough to do so. So yeah, it's not a supportive response for that particular individual.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. So this kind of feels like where circles matter most. Again, I have this theory, this hypothesis
Mhm.
about a woman's circle of care being one thing that can really um, benefit a woman, and then in turn
Mhm.
benefit relationships, right?
Mhm.
So, what happens when the support has to last months or years or not an afternoon? Like, what does durable long term support for a woman actually look like?
I think in part that comes from her relationships. Not all friendships are lifelong, but a part of going through those seasons comes with maintained relationships. Um, I think that's essentially how I would see that. If you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to
Yeah,
expand.
I have a different question. We'll skip to a different question.
Okay.
That was helpful, but here, what about this? So couples in their 20s and 30s listening now, um, what can they build today so a longer, harder season doesn't like catch them off guard, if you will? So when perimenopause comes
Mm,
around, it doesn't sort of catch them off guard. What can those younger
mm,
folks do?
sure. So I would say definitely working on your relationship, right? So you're working on that relationship support, if it's an intimate relationship, and then also taking care of yourself, um, physically, nutritionally, emotionally. It is really important to know how to put yourself first in a non-selfish sense. It's really important for individuals to understand that they are the only ones who can create change within their bodies to the extent that it is possible for them to have control over that response. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that's great.
Um, so, um, you know, the way our bodies work is that when we reach our 40s, 50s, and 60s, etc., um, how we cared for our bodies will show up. So if we do a lot of drinking or smoking, we don't exercise, we eat a bunch of junk, we're mean to others, we allow contempt and criticism to spew from us, and we accept it from others. All of those things do have an effect on ourselves and on how we experience our bodies. So, so in short, you want to invest, right? You want to invest in your physical health, your emotional health, your relational health, and you do that by doing things that are healthy for you consistently over time.
Absolutely. And then when you invest in these things earlier on, you sort of like take advantage of compound interest, right? So a husband
Exactly.
who's in his 20s, let's say, let's
Mhm.
not wait till she hits 40 to bring her healthy brownies. Let's learn how to make the
Mhm.
in the 20s, and let's
Mhm.
gym date in the 20s, and let's invest in our bodies so
Mhm.
that we can show up a little bit later down the road. And,
Mhm.
and our healthy habits
Yes.
will also sustain us later on down the road.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. So someone who's listening might have had said at some point in this, like, all right, this is my house somewhere in this conversation. This happens in my environment, in my relationship. I'm concerned about this. Like, what is one thing they could do this week before any therapy is involved to sort of set themselves up to have a better relationship?
One thing.
One thing.
Um, one
Okay.
thing. Okay. I would say um, take responsibility for yourself and apply that in every area.
What about what's one thing beyond what we just discussed with the healthy brownies?
Right.
What one thing that a husband can do, or
Mhm.
a supporter just in general in a woman's circle can do to help um, sort of show up a little bit better? One thing.
One thing. I'm going to give a detailed answer.
Okay, great.
uh, for him to take a moment of undivided attention, look at his wife, and ask, "How are you?" And allow that moment to unfold. Um, that's what I would say.
That's a pretty important thing. Yeah, that can go in a lot of different wonderful directions. So after that, so that's great. Okay, if you could put one sentence on a sticky note about every fridge, on every fridge, about
Mhm.
supporting the woman in your life, what would that say?
I would say help her take care of herself by giving her permission to do so.
That's great. That is very powerful. Yeah, and that means permission probably translates to the space too, right? Let her be
Mhm.
available to sort of take care of herself and do those things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this has been really wonderful. I know the conversation was a little bit all over the place. We talked about some wonderful parts of your practice, including the nutrition aspect and the couples therapy. We talked about some things that I'm curious about in terms of a woman's circle of care. So I hope that this conversation was certainly entertaining and informative to the audience out there. And the last thing I'm going to ask is, where can people find you and your work?
So they can find me at integrativesessions.net.
Awesome. Christina, thank you so much for your time. I look forward
You're
to
welcome.
having many more conversations in the future.
Sounds good, Aaron. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.